Hello, beautiful. And what I really want to know is what is good in your life today? I'm Kia, and this is another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. And today I have an incredible woman with me. She is the kind of guest that I really love to have. I would like to have more guests like this. She has a long history in the military. She's a retired Army and she served in the mid 70s. And I'm excited to learn more about what her experience was like. Now, her name is Penny Lee Deere, and we met through the Barbra Giordano Foundation. I was giving a masterclass on alter ego. I donate time to help my veteran sisters with the things I learn at the London Real Academy as a success coach. So one of the things I love doing is sharing that with my veteran sisters. And so I donate that time. And I was fortunate enough to meet Penny at this masterclass, and we had a great time. And I learned about her organization, Art for Vets. So we're going to talk more about that later. But for now, I want to thank you for coming to the Female Veterans Podcast, Penny.
Thank you for having me. I'm just thrilled to be here.
Well, let's get started because I can't wait to hear your story. So, what made you join the military?
For the most part, it was, I didn't really see myself having a future back home. It was a very small town. My expectations or somebody else's expectations for me would be probably to marry a local farmer and have 10 children
Wow.
and to be an old woman by the time I'm like 39 or something. So when I was in high school, I was told that I wasn't college material. And so they sent me to a trade school, a secretarial practice kind of thing
Mhm.
instead. And that was the two curriculums available at the time. And I I decided to join the military. I was thinking about the Peace Corps. And when I first looked at the military, I wanted to be a Marine. I really liked how smart they looked, and there was something about them that. Then I said to myself, maybe I'm not strong enough to be a Marine. Let's go Army instead. So I chose the Army, Women's Army Corps. So it was a different program in 1975. The other thing I wanted to mention was I actually joined while I was a senior in high school in April. I
Wow.
hadn't even graduated. And it was called delayed entry. And I would not leave until November, in the fall after graduation, having a summer off. And it turned out to be a little known secret that I got a little promotions ahead of time. I got paid ahead of time because I actually had 6 months to 8 months before everybody else. I got promoted, that kind of thing.
Wow. Well, you know what's a coincidence? I was delayed entry also, and I actually joined my senior year as well, and I didn't leave until November also for the Navy. So that's quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
Haven't met too many people with the exact same time frame for that. So you were Women's Army Corps. What
Yes.
was boot camp like for you?
We were part of a transitional program. All the women were completely segregated, but we happened to have a male drill sergeant, and that would have been one of the first sessions. Before everything would have been, the women would have all been drill sergeants as well. And I think we still had a standard boot camp, but there was a couple of interesting things in that. You see these movies, how people yell and swear and carry on. Our drill sergeant was Sergeant Gates, and I'll just say we were in Charlie 17-5. If anybody's listening, they'll know what that means at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. But anyway, so Sergeant Gates, if he was mad at you, he would call you a hamburger head. And if you did a really good job, he called you sweet pea. And in today's world, that would never happen. No.
That's
And then
actually
the
cute.
other and then the other thing I think is really interesting is we were actually completely segregated now. So we were young ladies. We dressed like young ladies. We were given classes on proper etiquette and attire and dining and even wearing makeup.
You're kidding
Yes,
me.
I am not kidding you.
You went to
No.
finishing school in the Army.
Yes, but we still did. We still, shot our guns and everything like that. So this was 1975, and the Women's Army Corps was disbanded in 1978, and I would still be in at that time. And so, as my story goes on, I'll tell you about it. But I think a couple cute stories that go along with it is, so our physical exercise uniform was a real blouse. A blouse, button down blouse with shorts underneath and a wraparound skirt with bobby socks, little white bobby socks, and sneakers. So we would march to the parade field, the exercise field. We would all be in right dress uniform, and we would unwrap our skirt, lay it beside ourselves. Then we did our exercise, everything. Then we wrapped the skirt around us. We did not go around half naked. We were ladies.
Wow.
I find them on the internet. There, you can still see them. Yeah, yeah.
You worked out in a blouse.
I did a real blouse, not t-shirts, not nope.
That's pretty incredible. Like, I can see it in my mind's eye, but I can't imagine doing it because I think of workout gear, right? Or like t-shirt and shorts, because that's,
Yeah.
the kind of thing. Well, we wore sweatsuit, but you don't think of a blouse like you wear out to dinner. To me,
No,
something
it
to
was
work
it was
out
a
in.
light green blouse. Yep, yep,
Wow. I'm gonna
yeah,
find pictures of that. I want to see
yeah. And
it.
the other thing I was going to mention, the Jody songs, that's what they're called, where you march to songs.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so some of the songs are something like, I gave, let me see, they took away my boyfriend and they made me sleep alone, was one of the things. Because why I say that is you weren't allowed to be married and you weren't allowed to have children.
Wow.
Yep, yep. So if something like that happened, if you accidentally got pregnant or something, you were discharged. Yeah,
Or
yeah.
decided to
We
get
were
married? What do you do if you decide to get
if you
married?
well, if you decided to get married, then you would be discharged. It would be, and then I have like how things changed after 1978. I can continue with that story because I every time I had to change my contract because things
Wow.
changed after they disbanded. The Women's Army Corps no longer exists.
Wow. Okay, so this was
Hmm.
boot camp for you. I do have another question about boot camp.
Hmm. Yep.
Did you make a lot of really close connections while you were there?
It's funny. Everywhere I've gone, there's probably been one or two people that really connected with me, and so I still am friends with some of these people still today.
That's
So
amazing.
yes, yes, yep. And as with 20 years, you find different people at different locations, and meet up again, perhaps.
Mhm.
Yep. So I think it was more of in boot camp. It was I was just coming from a small. I was so naive, just the overwhelming being away from home for one thing, but learning the whole system. And I actually think it's a cute story. Also, is that so? I'm from upstate New York, and basically it's all white. And so, everybody's different nationalities in the army. And so I really hit it off with the black girls who they taught me the hustle.
Oh, the dance?
It's like a line dance to me in our world.
Mhm.
So anyway, they look, a white girl can dance.
Oh.
We had fun. We had a lot of fun, and but we were also a team, and that's where you learned, working together, and it will all come back to play. It sounds like we're just playing around in boot camp, but we did everything else. We did women push-ups where it was on the knees,
Mhm.
and then you did, and later on, of course, I could do as many push-ups as the guys when I retired. But anyway, so yeah,
These are the little differences.
yeah,
So I'm interested to know, so once you finished boot camp, what was your active duty? How did that start? Because I know you went through many phases. So what was the
yes.
first phase like?
I had to learn my field of expertise, and it turned out to be a post office. So little did I know, again, it worked out so good. It was like I knew what I was doing. So I signed up for the postal service. And so I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana. And it was very quick. It was a months long school. But we actually followed all the regulations at any post office. Even today, they're the same rules. And I could tell you all the rules there is because I could run a post office from here to, the whole thing. But anyway, but the interesting thing about that was I went to postal school, and if you were deployed overseas, which I was overseas 11 and a half years out of my 20. So if I was overseas, I worked in the post office, actually doing the mail just like everybody else, only you did it on the Army base. Where if you went stateside, and I had 4 different locations stateside, I would be more like a secretary, an admin person, but I would
Wow.
have a specialty of the post office. So I might be the person delivering the mail, but I had other duties to do. So it changed wherever I went. And that went on for the first 10 years. And then I switched to military intelligence. So,
So back in the 70s, I imagine that did you have to experience any sort of like misogyny or anything like that? Or had that sort of died down a bit for a period?
um, interesting enough, I didn't see a lot of it until later on in my,
Wow.
yeah, it came into play later on in my case. But no, I think the difference is I think I held my own. It was like I was one of the guys, and maybe I wasn't thin skinned. I don't know. But thinking back, and I watch a lot of this now, where they accidentally said something to me at the American Legion the other day, and I said, "Oh, she's a girl. I can't talk like that." It was like they like, whoa, I better watch myself. But I did not in I would definitely say within the first 10 to 15 years I didn't see a lot of that. So maybe that's because in 1978 we transitioned from Women Army Corps, okay?
Mhm.
So we were completely segregated. Then all of a sudden you have these women going right side by side to men, and they don't know what to do with us. It's my sister standing here or my mother standing here, like, so we were treated like it's kind of cool, it's nice to have a little, so we would have like a wing of the barracks, and this is no, like, I was in the first armor division in Ansbach, Germany. There was 20 women. A division has like 10,000 troops, and there's 20 women.
Wow.
Yeah, and I worked at the post office, but we had like a just a wing of a barracks. And later on, there would be co-ed, where you're literally coming out of the shower where the guys are coming in, that kind of thing. It's
Wow.
completely like the world changed with
What
me in
what did
it.
that feel like for you as you were experiencing that?
um, I guess I took it with a grain of salt because it was gradual. It looking back, it's kind of interesting. But at the time I was doing it, I was just going along with it. So as you said, well, what do you do if you get married, or what do you do if you have children? So I did find, if you can believe, one of the guys out of the 10,000 that I ended up marrying. Well, in order to do that, you had to get permission from the company commander. It was like going to the priest or something. You had to like have a counseling session. Are you sure you want to get married? We have to sign this contract that it's okay for you to get married because you're in the army now. You're not part of the Women's Army Corps anymore. So my old contract no longer existed. Okay. So I had to get permission to get married. And I happened to be in Germany. So you had to get married in their courthouse out on the economy first. And then if you wanted to have a church wedding or something, you could. But you had to get married in Germany in another language. And then it was a couple years later, I had my first child. Again, they said to me, you can get out, You don't have to stay in. It was like they were going to. I said, "What's wrong with you people? I want to stay in." When I left, I said I was going to be gone for 20 years. I'm going to retire here. So they finally, by the time I had my second child, they were used to women, and it wasn't even an option. So yeah.
What year was that you had your second child?
She was born in 84. So I had my first child in 79. So really, they had just stopped having Women's Army Corps. I got married, and then 18 months later or something, I had my first child. So yeah,
Wow. So, what was it like to be a mom during that time period while serving?
it's really rough, actually. In
Mhm.
order for everybody to get their attention that they need, especially, I later became a sole parent.
Mhm.
And so that was even tougher that I couldn't just know that the husband's going to pick them up and everything is good to go and he'll pick up the slack. But it's rough in that this type of soldier I was, I wanted to be the best, and I had the troops that I'm looking after, some 50 of them during the daytime, basically, and then you'd come home, and then you have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old that demands your attention, or they've got homework, and it's like, so your world didn't stop; it just keeps on going for the next time. So I actually realized that there was a void in the service, and that because I had to do 24-hour duty, the daycare's closed at 6 o'clock. So what do you do with this child that needs overcare? And it cost me a lot of money to provide daycare for 24 hours if you were gone a week. Somebody else is taking care of your child and hope that they did a job. So later on, when I retired, I opened up a daycare, 24-hour daycare, to provide the service that wasn't available. I would pick them up from the military daycare on post, and then I would drop them back off at 6 o'clock in the morning when it was allowed, that kind of thing. So I filled a
Wow.
void. Yeah.
That's amazing. I definitely want to get to that in
Okay.
a bit, but I have lots of questions about that, I feel like. But before we go there, how did your career evolve in the 80s?
Okay. The 80s. Let's see. So I would basically go from the overseas 3 years and then come back in the States, usually about 3 years, and then back overseas. And so what happened was I was at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and that's the intelligence school. And
Mhm.
so I was working admin, and my main job was helping them put together their promotion packets. And all these people that were younger than me, I was putting in their promotion packets and making sure they were all squared away. I'm helping them get promoted when, because I was in an admin field, they didn't need them, right? So it was supply and demand. So
Right.
I decided to reclassify. So that would have been 85. So I've been in for 10 years. I've been doing admin and postal, and I reclassified and military intelligence, like a spy.
Ooh, and the
So,
plot thickens.
uh, it worked out well. At first, I didn't really care for it because so you've got people who are younger than you who actually knew more than you, but I was in leadership position, so I caught on. It was just that it was a limbo thing at first, and then the job itself is extremely interesting in that I was over in Germany during the pre-solidarity. It was during the Cold War, so we were watching the Russians and all the Soviet bloc countries, Warsaw Pact, all that, the Iron Curtain. That was my job, to watch them all. What are they up to? Are they really training? Are they going to attack instead? Um,
Wow.
and then in 1989, with solidarity started in Poland, and the fall of the wall in Berlin, the Iron Curtain came down, Czechoslovakia divided, all the Russians went home, all the satellites, it was USSR, there was
Mhm.
19 satellites, and then there was Mother Russia. All those dissolved. I watched it all. I was part of the whole thing where they were disassembling they were supposed to get rid of all their armor divisions, their tanks. So they would take the turret off of a tank and make it a tractor, that kind of
Wow.
thing. Watched it all. Yeah. Yeah. And then we moved on to Desert Storm. Like just like that, I changed the enemy. So that's 1990, 91.
So,
So,
when you were watching all those things happen, going from keeping an eye on them as an intelligence officer, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm, mhm.
to seeing all that just dissolving, what did that feel like? What was that like for you?
Well, for one thing, I guess I wasn't a very trusting soul. So I was just telling you they took off the turrets, right, and made it a tractor. Well, if it's that easy to make it the tractor, it's that easy to put the turret back on, and you
Mhm.
could easily have a tank again.
Yes.
So I guess I was, and still today, I can see some similarities, right?
Mhm.
So when I see Croatia and Yugoslavia and Russia messing around, it's like deja vu.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Um, so something interesting in that. So one of the jobs. So I can tell you what the enemy's forces look like. That was their job to know where not so much the friendlies, but I knew what their equipment looked like. So when I got deployed to Desert Storm, and so we Hips and Hines are helicopters that are in the Russian fleet. Okay. So when I'm over in Desert Storm and all of a sudden there's this hip that comes across the berm, well, the Russians had sold it to the Egyptians. So they are friendly. You can't shoot them down. It's like
Right.
we switched, hello, what am I supposed to do now? Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty crazy.
And to learn a new enemy, like a new, so when I went over, Iraq had just invaded Kuwait.
Right.
And so I used to watch all the Soviet bloc, and then now we're in a different terrain and a different, like, the whole scheme just changed. So my job is to actually, I wasn't the person out on observing it all. I got information from different sources. It's like putting a puzzle together. And so my job was to tell the 7th Corps commander what he could expect in front of him. And so, for instance, if there was a tanks in front of you, you want to take something that's going to kill a tank. And that means either an Apache helicopter or another tank. You see what? So if there are soldiers that are on the ground and they don't need to take a tank, it's, other rifles will do.
Wow.
And it turns out that all that bothered me, that I actually was the targeteer and mass destroyed a lot of people, a lot of equipment, and a lot of. I had I have post traumatic stress from that. Actually, you
My
couldn't have told me
goodness.
that back then. It's something that you just like, wow, you're responsible.
That's heavy. Oh my goodness. I can absolutely imagine what a weight that is and how you must, you know, work through that, even
Hmm.
for forever.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, we believe that we are doing what's necessary, you know,
Right.
what's necessary to actually help a lot of people and to protect our own country, right?
Absolutely. Now you've got moral injury. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's such a conflict, you know?
And then it really didn't matter because it's still going on. We just changed locations a little bit. It's like it really was for nothing. It's like ongoing, right? This was 1990, Iraq, and now we're in Afghanistan. How long we've been there?
Yeah, it's been forever.
Yeah.
What's interesting? So I went in 1994 into the Navy, and I served until 2000, well, 1999 November. So that was my active, and then I went inactive reserve, and then 9/11 happened. So and that was just right after the end of my inactive reserve, so I didn't get called back in. So I always tell people I served during the last peacetime we may ever see because
Yeah.
this little window of time. I'm actually a Desert Storm. I went in at the end of Desert Storm, so I'm a Desert
Right.
Storm combat veteran. However, I came in at the end where we were pulling everybody back. We were,
Right.
pretty much done there. And but this little window of time between that and 9/11 was
Yeah.
peacetime, and who knows if we'll ever see it again, right? It's just
Right.
I used to be really like, well, I'm a Desert Storm veteran, but I really didn't see any action, and I felt like some sort of weird shame about it. I don't know, but now I'm like, wow, what a crazy time to have served. Who knows if we'll ever see peace again?
Right. Right.
At least in my
I agree.
lifetime, maybe. You know. So it's
Right.
just an interesting way to see that, and that you saw so much from like the Cold War, where we weren't necessarily in combat, but we were watching and we
Oh,
were prepared,
absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
To go
Yeah.
into Desert Storm, where we were like taking action and there were things
Hmm.
that need to happen there, right? We got
And
boots on the
really, people aren't really thinking about it, but we're really in a Cold War right now.
ground. Let's
Let's stay away from that.
no, I want to talk about
Uh,
it, but
oh,
before
uh, so I have a real quick, interesting story. I think so.
great.
I was I was in military intelligence, and one of the things you do is pick up people different equipment so that you can verify that you. For instance, that one of our units was foreign equipment analyst. So I actually got to drive a T-72 tank. This is a 60-ton tank going 60 miles an hour. And the reason we had access to it was it goes back to before we were in Afghanistan, back when the Soviets were in Afghanistan. So
Hmm.
when they left their tank, we grabbed them to bring them back for intelligence purposes to go through it to see how it worked, its capabilities, its limitations, that kind of thing. So I drove. I would that's pretty interesting. They said, I'm putzing around, and then they said you can go faster. So all of a sudden, it's like a tractor. It's got these pull things. They're like, "Arr!" Anyway, it's cool.
How fun was
Not
that?
many people can say that.
It sounds like a lot of fun, actually, to me. So we have you at Desert Storm.
Hmm.
And so when you finished with Desert Storm, what was your next phase? I imagine that concluded one phase of your
Hmm.
career and then another one began. What was the next one?
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about Desert Storm, if that's okay or no.
Oh no, absolutely.
Okay. Only because of the culture, the things that we had to go through. It's one thing to be over there and you're fighting a war,
Hmm.
okay? But it's the desert, flat, nothing, no terrain. So, for instance, we have all these tents set up, and there was this berm. So all of it was like a village that was in a berm, which that means it's a bunch of sand that's piled 40 feet high
Hmm.
in a big circle, and then there's big circles inside of circles. And so it was tricky to get home, like where you worked and where you lived and where you ate. You had to shoot an azimuth, like a compass, to shoot a degree, 180 degrees, walk straight in line because you can't use a flashlight. The enemy would see you. And the sand got into everything. Like if you did your laundry and you put your underwear out, it's just full of sand again. It was like miserable.
My
And
goodness.
it was nasty. We did 12-hour shifts, and so the time went fast, but we were so busy, or you were tired after your shift and stuff like that. But it was just a miserable place to be. Your showers are immersion heaters that if you heated them up, they'd be gone in 30 seconds. So it's like, you might as well take cold showers, just to wash your hair and stuff. So the aftermath of Desert Storm is 1/3 of us are sick medically.
Right.
Gulf War syndrome. And again, I didn't know any of this until after I retired, and now I'm actually doing research and help other veterans learn more about it. But I knew there was stuff wrong with me after service, but I didn't blame it on anything. I just thought I was getting old, you
I
know.
see.
So that's the Gulf War syndrome, and a lot of people. What it turned out to be about 10 years after. So I got out in 95, and then things started just showing up. So many of us have chronic fatigue syndrome,
Hmm.
fibromyalgia, GERD, sleep apnea, sleep disturbances. And more than like sleep tears, it's like it actually affects your nervous system. Whatever this is, these exposures that we had, and there's many exposures. Depleted uranium that we have, it's ours ourselves. If you fire a tank, you're going to have depleted uranium. It's just one of those things. Um, or when they blew up the ammunition dump, the plume of smoke that had the nerve agent, it just goes everywhere, right? How can you contain that?
Exactly.
Um, Even the sand, they're so fine. I have particles in my lungs. And it's not just me. You can ask any, just happen at like when you're interviewing people and they were in the Gulf War, ask them if they don't have some of these symptoms. A lot of people, I'm working with 2 people right now that knew nothing about it, never went to the VA, and just now finding out that what's wrong with them comes from the Gulf War.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm really familiar with Gulf War syndrome.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I do believe um, I had an aunt who served in the army for many years, like
Hmm.
yourself. She got out right after that because she was sick, right?
Yep.
And so I'm familiar with it. Also, interestingly enough, I have a lot of symptoms of Gulf War illness, and I didn't go over there.
That's not unusual.
So it's just interesting. I have fibromyalgia. I don't know if I think I mentioned I'm a disabled vet,
Hmm.
also, but I have
Hmm.
fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, sleep apnea. I have
Hmm.
widespread pain. I have migraines.
Hmm.
And this all, and I always thought maybe it came from an immunization, right?
Well, we were given many of them in
Right.
preparation. Absolutely.
So I always believed that because it was about, well, it's not Epstein Barr. I have Epstein Barr
Yes.
virus.
Hmm.
And so I have mono. I haven't had mono in 5 years, which is a record. Since the time I left the military, I would get sick with mono every
Yep.
single
Yep.
year. And it was like such a fight for them to even recognize any of these
Yep.
illnesses.
Yep.
But it started in 1995. I got a sore throat. That sore throat led to strep throat. 3 strep throats later, I had mono.
Yep.
Mono came
Hmm.
back every year for 3 years. By the
Yep.
end of that, just as I was getting out of the military, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue just before my exit
Hmm.
physical.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that you say that, and I know that a lot of people suffer with it. And the thing is now on top of that, so everyone's been in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and now we're hearing about the burn pits, which is something
Yes.
that I'm absolutely obsessed with. If you know me, I talk about it a lot because of a
Hmm.
former guest who is actually slowly dying. She's my dear friend Christina. I believe she's in season 2. She has a 2-part. Her story is something I'll never forget, to say the least. And it's the burn pits. And so breathing in, it's like you said, those plume of smoke that go everywhere.
Hmm.
How are you going to avoid breathing that in? And it's
Yep.
always interesting to me how our government responds to these things with their veterans that they love
Yeah.
so much, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So before we could talk about that for like 2 more hours, but I want
Hmm.
to double back to your story and we'll come back
Hmm.
around to what you've learned about Gulf
Hmm.
War syndrome.
Yeah. With with these burn pits, though, it's not just there happen to be we burned our feces,
It's everything.
and then but when we left, everything went in a pile, the tires,
hmm
everything, and
hmm
we just torched it or
hmm
buried them. The other thing about Gulf War syndrome is our children are being affected.
hmm
So a lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're up to, I left Desert Storm, and I went back to Stuttgart, Germany, and we closed down Seventh Corps. So they actually kind of like just packed everything up and retired it. I don't think they case the colors, and they can be brought up at any time depending on. So one of my jobs was to give back a military installation to the Germans.
Oh, wow.
Yep, to sign it off, and then I would retire in 1995. So, one of the things that when we left, so I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and it turned out they were closing that post too. So an entire brigade, moved from Fort Monmouth, New Jersey to Fort Gordon, Georgia as a whole. That's very unusual for like 1,000 people or more. I
Wow.
don't, I'm bad about the numbers, but all of us converging on Augusta, Georgia, basically. So that was another thing where you're closing down one post completely. And I recently went back where the place where we used to live, and nobody, all the veterans that are homeless, these housings are empty, empty,
What?
wide open. It's disgusting. Probably 200 units available, nothing. It just makes me mad. So I retired in 95. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about that was when I left, I said I was going to be gone for a 20-year period. So at 19 years or so, I started a year out. And one of the first things I did was get sober. I went to my first sergeant and said, I did not want to be one of those veterans that sat on the bar stool at the VFW and just
Wow.
got drunk. Because when I was in, it was very, and I honestly don't know, like with the current climate, it was very common for me to take my soldiers to the NCO club and have a couple beers. You don't have to get blasted, but you just to have a couple beers,
Right.
or vice versa, where your boss takes you out after working all day, to have a couple of beers, that kind of thing. So it became a common occurrence to have beers after work. Or when you come home, in my case, I would probably take either a 6 pack or like a 40 ounce, stop
Mhm.
at the store on the way home. And now I'm a mom.
Wow.
We're trying to rake out a living here. And anyway, so I just knew that it was time for a change. And I did the AA program. I did everything that was supposed to be done. And then was sober for 13 years, and I do enjoy beer now. So it's like, but I have to be, I guess that's one of the things I would caution people about. I am well aware of the fact that basically I'm a drunk. I have to be very careful but not to take the third beer. It's almost like Friday night's my date night, and I enjoy one or two beers. But it's like I get mean. I don't want to be that person again. I don't ever want to be the person that needs the drink, that kind of thing. So I the neat thing about it all was I gained clarity. Like your mind's not fogging all the time. And it took a good year to actually see that where I'd been missing important stuff in my life, or maybe even blacked out. Like there's pieces of my life I don't remember. And is it because of that, or it wants to protect it where trauma protects it? If
Right.
you have trauma and things like that. So I did want to bring that up. A lot of people don't talk about alcoholism or where that whole thing, but I've done a lot of work on myself. So, you have to, like I did with my alter ego, right? I'm my own worst critic.
Right.
And I'm guilty of that. So, anyway, and now I'm really active with the veterans, but before I go on to all that, is there points that we should talk about?
Absolutely. So I have 2 questions for you. So I wanna just go into the alcoholism just
Yes.
just a bit.
Yeah, sure.
And my question there is, so when you started drinking, it was like a gradual thing, right?
Yes.
It was just, you're going out, it's casual, it's after work, you know, at what point did you realize it was a problem? Was it, mood swings or, losing time, or what was it for you?
Okay, I got an answer for you. I would have my soldiers tell me what I did the night before, and I
Okay.
don't remember. And I said, that's unacceptable. They respected me. And then I'm here telling them that I got in somebody's face or was going off on the sergeant major or something that's not me,
Mhm.
right? Or being promiscuous,
Oh,
people
goodness.
talking about you, things like that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You go get her a couple of beers, and she'll do whatever you want to do, that kind of thing.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So were there like rumors about you on the base or something? Or was it just you were hearing these one-off
Uh,
comments and you were like, no good?
actually, actually, no. My soldiers would come to me. They would. That's what's a good troop that
Hmm.
said, you might want to, we
Lay
went
off the.
bowling and yeah. Or even my children.
Hmm.
For instance, we got play practice tonight, Mom. Well, I've had a couple beers. I can't take you. Go ask somebody else to take you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I finally was listening. There was something that said, even today, my daughter is 30. We can openly talk about this. She's older than that. She's 35. And, but we can openly talk about that, how it was an issue. Yeah. Now, and then I opened up that daycare. You can't be drunk having a daycare.
No,
So,
absolutely not.
right.
So
So
getting
anyway,
sober
but
was good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So,
Oh, let me go back to the how I got started. Actually, so I was married to somebody who drank too much, and
mhm,
so I was married to him for 9 years, and that's kind of an interesting story in itself. But he was the drinker. I didn't drink. When he left, I became the drinker. It was
that's
like I was taking
interesting.
care of him all that time. I had to be the responsible one to pick up the kids at the daycare because he'd already had that six pack on the construction site before he ever went to go pick up the kids, that kind of thing.
Mhm,
And so, and then that all played into it. By then, I'm an NCO, and then I'm either got my troops or I'm going out with the boss or something like that. So it all, yeah, very gradual. I wouldn't, and at that time, I couldn't tell you it was things that were bothering me.
mhm.
But I know now that there was underlying issues, military sexual trauma, things like that. So, but it doesn't do any good to mask your feelings because nothing gets done.
So you said one of the issues that you were masking was military sexual trauma. And I know we
Right.
talked about like misogyny, but we didn't really go into like harassment or anything like that. Um, so I want to ask you what your experience was with those kinds of things like harassment and that being that you had such a long career and over the
Hmm.
time period that you served.
Hmm. So looking back, there was little snide remarks, but again, at first, I don't think I was paying attention, or maybe I would even give them the smack back.
Mhm.
Like if they're talking
Lots
stuff.
of us are like that.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So, but things what had happened with the military sexual trauma in my case, and actually, I did a play. Well, somebody played me doing this play. So after the incident happened, I would hear these snide remarks that I hadn't heard before, and it would be things like, if I went to the motor pool, I would love to check her oil with my dipstick.
Ah, mhm,
Or say if we're in a training session and I was eating an ice cream,
mhm,
and they were
mhm,
just like they were getting it off on it. It was like, so I personally did not take action when my trauma happened, and that was the wrong thing to do. Well, of course, actually I have no idea if that's right or wrong. People ended up dead when they reported,
mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
what's the real answer? Okay, so anyway, the reason I say the initial thought is the reason I was saying that I made an error not reporting it at the time is because it wasn't nipped in the bud. Nothing was done about it at that time, and I was going off to war. I confided in another soldier, my same rank, and he said, if you don't do anything about it, you're going to end upside down in a foxhole. So
Wow.
he didn't mean to be, but he planted the seed that you're not even safe in your compound. It's not the enemy that's going to get you, it's
Mm,
inside the wire.
yeah. Yeah.
So that
Oof.
plays a huge part.
Yes.
And, and, but I do like to tell the story on how I got this person back.
Oh, let's hear that.
Um, so we were in military intelligence, and this person was so I knew him. It was
Mhm,
he was in the military intelligence field, and we all have to have very, very top secret clearances. Okay, so for his particular field that he's in, he needed a clearance. So I happened to be at another location, Fort Gordon, where somebody asked me, I noticed that you were at this same location with this person here. Do you happen to know him, or can you tell me anything about him? And I said, as a matter of fact, I can. And so I told my story. And so what ended up happening is he did not get the clearance. He could not hold that field anymore. And with that particular thing, it was almost like if he became another, say, if he was an admin person, he couldn't get promoted. So indirectly, he would have been discharged. He wouldn't have been be able to stay in the intelligence field. He wouldn't have been be able to be promoted any. So I don't really know what happened, but the possibilities, I laid the ground for him to be dismissed.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
brave.
I felt vindicated.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, it's a powerful thing that your friend told you about ending up.
Upside down.
Yeah. And my mind just immediately goes to Vanessa Guillen, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yes.
why she was afraid to report and didn't report, And so, because she feared retaliation. And I'm thinking about, this is what, that was April of this year of 2020.
So things haven't changed.
And that's what we're dealing with. That's
Yeah.
why this podcast is important. That's why we have so many groups of female veterans speaking out right now, and why we have to continue to speak out, because this is the history. This is as old as the history of women serving.
Yep. Yep.
So, and it really, it's this, you think it's the 21st century and something would have changed, but we're still there,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So it's really upsetting. I'm really sorry that that happened to you. And another thing that makes me really angry about the experience that you had, and that many women I talk to on this podcast have. Unfortunately, it is more common than not that that's part of
Oh
the
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Um, is that then you have to work through that trauma. Sometimes you don't even, sometimes we sweep it under the rug. We don't deal with it right away, and that causes all sorts of problems, perhaps alcoholism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we finally, hopefully, get to a point where we start to face the trauma, and then it's years more of the work that it
Right.
takes to try to resolve, or at least get to a point where you can live with the trauma in a more healthy way.
Yep.
And this is many, many, many years of life we're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
The rest of your life, really, that's impacted by someone's choice to do a violent, hostile act
Yep.
against another person.
Mm-hmm.
Toxic masculinity, I want to call it. And then the saddest thing about the whole thing is that the majority of the time there's no real justice.
Right.
So
With
it's
with social
upsetting.
media, I found that I later told my bosses and my troops about it later, like recently,
Mm,
last 4 or 5 years, say,
really?
right? They had no idea. And they wished that I had come to them, that they would
Really?
have taken care of it. Even if it wasn't legal, so to speak, they would have my back. Or they would at least,
Wow.
yeah. So in that case, I know at a number of, and the other thing I can tell you is because it's a play, people have seen the story.
Hmm.
So I found out that some of my troops, 3 or 4 women, had the same issue
With the
and
same
didn't come
guy?
to me. No, 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 no,
Oh.
no, but didn't come to me.
Oh,
See what I'm saying?
wow.
They didn't come. They
Yeah.
didn't feel. I see it over and over again. How many people actually got discharged, personality discharges or something, because they
Mm.
went AWOL or something, but they were
Mhm.
raped or they
Yes.
didn't feel safe in that environment.
Yes. Mhm.
So, so I do fight as far with myself about, I was, when I first joined the military, Women's Army Corps, we were completely segregated. So is that the answer for us to be completely segregated? No,
It shouldn't have to be.
no. Right. And in all fairness, it's not all male on women.
Mhm.
It can be. men in the Navy. Oh my word.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good thing right now.
I mean,
Anyway,
it's not
it's just
only,
coming to it's
yeah.
coming everything's coming forward. Thank God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Bring it up to light so it can heal. And whatever we
right,
have to
right,
do
right.
to create a wave
Yep.
of positive change, that means we
Yeah.
got to face it first. Right.
I actually did it was like a poem drama kind of thing, and I had 3 men come to me
Mm-hmm.
and thanked me for bringing military sexual trauma to light. 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only ones I know that were in the audience that day.
Well, I will tell you this. I think last year I was doing research for a speech, and the statistic was 1 out of 100 men. And
Mhm.
at the time, I think it was three out of 4 females, but one out
Mhm.
of 100 men. Now, 1 out of 100 men seems like a small amount, but when you look at the amount of men in the military, you
Mhm.
realize that is a
It's
tremendous
huge.
amount of men being assaulted in the military as well. And men are less likely to report. We know that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
it manifests different than women too.
yes,
Being
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a huge problem, but every time we talk about it and we put it out there and we go through social media and we do things like your art and your plays and everything that you do, we expose it. We expose it more and more so that positive change can happen. So I can
Yeah.
only hope that there will come a day where we're hearing there's less and less and then none of these occurrences, right? So that's what we've got to fight for, I think. And
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you, so your transition out of the military, you
Mhm.
got sober, but
Mhm.
what about, so when did you start the daycare? What about that? How did that all?
The way it worked out was I had a lot of leave, and so I had 90 days saved up, and so I was still on active duty when I started the daycare. So immediately was is the answer.
Wow.
So I was already doing part time daycare, like on the weekends or after my regular duties. Normally, it's a 9 to 5 job unless
Hmm.
something's going on. So I'd already started daycare or subbing for other people. And as it turns out, I was down in Georgia at the time, and so my whole home was a daycare. It wasn't like I went to another location and opened it up. We lived in the daycare. And turns out my daughter hated it. She always had to share her mommy. She hated
Yeah.
it. So, but yeah, and it was very successful. And the only reason I stopped it was I went back to school for. I started to say something. It turns out these in-home daycares are certified through the Georgia State Department. So
Hmm.
they come in your home and inspect and things like that. So we have like 3 or 4 different people that we would work and coordinate with. Well, I can't take so and so today, or this one gets on my nerves. Will you please take her? That kind of thing. And it turned out that I have 25 kids enrolled in the daycare. You can only have 6 at a time, but it turned out 5 had special needs, like ADD kids or autism or something. And it turns out that I gravitated towards them. I was accepting towards them. So I ended up going back to school for special education. And the reason it turns out is that it turns out I was 39 years old when I found out I had a learning disability.
Wow.
So that's why I gravitated to these kids that were like, this person gets on my nerves. I can't stand them. Well, come on, Penny, I'll take you. Let's do this. Whatever. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
So, and that's a whole nother story on how
No,
I
but
got my accommodations and modifications. And first semester in college, I had taken college throughout the military, like a semester at a time, and I did fine, A's and B's. But anyway, I went from my first semester, I was basically on probation, 1.33,
mm,
failing everything. And they said, something's wrong. This girl was military intelligence. She did 20 years in the service and she can't pass college. What's up with that? So they tested me. And so it turns out that my reading and writing and comprehension and spelling is so poor compared to my oral communication skills. It's like this, right?
Sounds like my
And
son.
yeah. So it turns out it's the old dyslexic, like
It is.
transposing numbers and letters.
Yes.
So I'm actually really good in math. Only say if the reason I got a B or a C in the math is because I transposed the numbers. 34, 43, that it makes a difference.
Right.
Anyway, so once I got the accommodations, I'm on the dean's list. And so from then on, it took me a long time. So I went to special education. The only thing I didn't complete was the student teaching, and I ended up, because of other issues, we had to relocate back to upstate New York. Actually, I lost a son in 1999,
Oh, I'm
and
so sorry.
he was 19 years old. And so I came home, and we were in Georgia. And so it took me a while to get my degree, and I literally just in March completed a community human services degree at the age of 64 with a learning disability.
That is amazing.
Yep, yep. It was so my husband, for instance, says, "What are you doing this for? Why are you driving yourself nuts?" Well, it was important for me to get a degree, and I finally did it. Oh, and the other thing we didn't talk about was I became a licensed massage therapist. And the reason I did that would have been 2014, 2012. The reason I did that was I wanted to help other veterans because of the Gulf War syndrome. And massage is one of those things that help. And so I wanted to donate my time with that. And it turned out that I learned so much about my own body and better understanding of it. And then that rolled into alternative therapies of all different kinds of things that I get involved with. So it turned out really well. So I'm still a licensed massage therapist in New York as well as national. I could massage anywhere.
That's fantastic. I feel like as a veteran, I feel my best, and I have since probably, I don't know, 2003, when I help other veterans,
Yep.
right? And I just feel like anything that I do that's like with especially female veterans, but I have
Mhm.
helped male veterans and stuff with, getting their benefits and
Mhm.
signing up for their GI Bill and like, just being a peer support. Actually, that's been probably the most thing I've done. And it has always been really fulfilling for me, especially the first few years I left the military. I didn't even tell people I was in the military.
Right.
Like it was just like a part of my life that I tried to just compartmentalize. But it's odd how it turns out that helping other veterans is what sort of saved my life in a way and
I
continues
couldn't
to be
agree
an
more.
important part of my life. Clearly, it's really important to me. So we are like minded in that, and I find a lot of veterans have that. We want
Mhm.
to help each other,
Yep.
and
The other thing I find is, say if people are stuck, they're in a bad place, or they just
Mhm,
can't get over that hurdle. Once they get the idea that, ah, I can help somebody else because I went through this, and they start helping other people, that's when the transition happens.
mhm.
It's gradual. It's all of a sudden, wow, okay. But so many people, it's just my opinion, is they're self-absorbed right now and they can't get past it. But then I might say something like, "Well, what about this? Could we do this with this other person? What do you think about that?" That's a great idea. And then I said, "Oh my God, I had so much fun. This is so rewarding." That kind of thing. So
It's beautiful. And
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your play, actually.
Mhm.
How did that come about?
Workforce Development had a grant, and they wanted to interview women veterans, and so they came to the VA. It was a women's group there at the VA, and they asked anybody. First, they kind of interviewed us and asked us if anybody be interested in talking about, and so it was civilians, like 3 or 4 women. But then there was such an interest that they went to the local high school drama club and brought them back to interview us. So the high school students interviewed each veteran. We got paired up. And that person played us on the stage. It is incredible to watch this girl telling your story on the stage, and you're in the audience.
Wow, that
Yes,
sounds
yes.
really cool.
Yeah. It's called On Her Shoulders, and I can send you the link.
I'd
It's
love
actually
that.
on YouTube, so it's an easy hyperlink you can go to. The whole play is an hour, and there was 9 women veterans, and we do all tell our stories. They're about 20 minutes each, something like that. And they all had different stories. Lady had from Oklahoma bombing, Air
Wow.
Force. She did the recovery.
Mhm.
Um, they're really nice stories. That they all have different. Yeah, 9 different
Well,
women veterans.
that sounds amazing, and I am
Yeah.
definitely gonna check that out, and as you know, I will drop the link in the show notes, which is the description of the episode,
Mhm.
and, you can everyone can watch it, go watch it.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
And, so your transition out of the military, would you say it went smoothly? Because before you were even out, you had a business going.
It went okay, but then everything fell apart. Like, I
Oh.
thought I had my stuff together, and
Mhm,
and it turned out in about, so I got out in 95, and then things started falling apart about 2003,
mhm.
where all this stuff started bothering me, and then I finally went to the VA. So how many years is that? 95, 8 years after I retired, I finally went to the VA and sought help. And it took me 13 years. This is no lie. 13 years of going to weekly therapy sessions, going through 13 mental health providers. And then I finally got the diagnosis of PTSD. 13 years.
That seems like why didn't they know that in the first year?
Well, I think part of the problem is the way myself and other women veterans present themselves. Like,
Oh.
I'm stoic, right?
Ah, okay,
Okay.
I was gonna ask you what you
Whereas
meant.
where the guys might get in bar fights,
Mhm,
like or they might go to jail because they punched out DWIs, whatever. So I'm a drinker at home. You know what I
right.
mean? That kind of thing. You see what I'm saying? Well, anyway, so somewhere along the way, somebody said, well, it turned out not only once they figured it out, what was going on with me is that it was complex PTSD. It
Mhm,
wasn't, so yes, they all wanted to blame it on my loss of my son. Okay, so
yes.
what was wrong with me before? Did you pay attention to the military sexual trauma? Did you, the childhood traumas, the these crazy men that I chose relationships with,
Mhm.
literally crazy,
The
like manic
wartime
depressives,
things.
right? Wartime, right? The war, not only going to war, but like I was telling you about the moral injury. It's
Mhm,
all compounded in how people, deal with it or don't deal with it.
yes. Mhm,
So, so interesting enough, I finally went to a, they started having these programs at RVA. And so one of the things I went was a music therapy class. And this first song, these counselors have been trying to get me to show my emotions for 13 years. The first song came and we started singing it. All you have to do is dream, ball and like crazy.
my goodness.
And that was the breakthrough. Ever since 2016, things have started happening for me. Whereas,
Wow.
so I was in music, and then I did drama and creative writing and all these different alternatives. And I'm at a point with the mental health providers where I'll call them if I need to check in.
Mhm,
And literally, and I have a little gripe with this COVID thing. Nobody checks in with you to make sure you're okay. You're in isolation and nobody checks in. I have to call them. And
yeah.
I've even spoke to them about it. I said, I'm one thing I'm going to call you and speak up. You know that. But you have this caseload. Have you called them to check in on them? I told my mental health provider that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a collective trauma. So I imagine all of us that live with PTSD and all of these other compound PTSD or complex PTSD,
Hmm.
um, childhood PTSD, all of us that live with that and other traumas, right?
Yeah,
COVID is another trauma
it is.
right on top of it, right?
Right,
And so
right.
you would think that they would be more proactive, but maybe it's because they're going through maybe their first trauma. So they don't even
That
know
could
how
be.
to deal with it really, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
They need us to help them.
yeah. One of the things that's interesting about that is November last year, I went to Songwriters with Soldiers, and that's a great opportunity for you to sit down with songwriters and write a song. But during the COVID, they got us back together, all the women veterans that went in the group, and we did another retreat online, so to speak. But we wrote our song just now, like in the last 3 months, about how we're dealing with COVID. It's just another battle for us. That's the song lyrics is like, okay, our wills are ready. We know what to do. We can carry everything on our back that we need. We've got this. It's just another battle. We made a song.
Oh my gosh, I feel like emotional. I got goosebumps. I love that you know what I had a friend who got stuck in Panama and he was
Uh,
freaking out. He's ex CIA and he's got definitely a lot of trauma, moral injury, I think.
yeah. Hmm.
And he's one that I would remind to take his meds and stuff like that. But when he was in Panama and they closed down everything, and he was like, I can't get out. They're not giving me humanitarian flights. And we talked about it a bunch. And he was really freaking out. And I said to him, you're ex CIA. Remember your training.
Yeah.
Remember your training. This is nothing. You got
Hmm.
this. Like,
Yeah.
and then he was fine. But
Hmm.
it's just like you said. It's like it's another battle. What a beautiful song to write, and what a beautiful, beautiful message. But I think I'm gonna title this episode that.
Okay, great.
I love it. Beautiful.
Good,
So
good.
I also love to two more things
Hmm.
because we probably should wrap it up soon. But I love to talk about alternative therapies on this show. And we've talked about a lot of them. I mean, we've talked about marijuana, we've talked about ketamine therapy, we talked about Saraganian block therapy for pain, and there's many more.
Hmm.
But I want to talk about some of the therapies that you do because those are all sort of medical in
Hmm.
nature.
Hmm.
But let's talk about creative therapies, the ones that you've been doing.
Okay.
And I definitely want to promote that because painting has helped me heal as
Hmm.
well as dancing. And so I want to just make sure that everyone is aware that I support all the kind of alternative therapy
Hmm.
that you can find out there because I believe that you have to find what works for you. So you've done all of these things. Will you talk about that and your experience with them a little bit?
Absolutely. I personally really like horse therapy,
Mm.
equestrian. Um, and what's really interesting to that is you can tell the horse your story. They're there to listen for you. They just accept you. You don't even need words. They know. So, of course, even having a pet, a cat or a dog, is phenomenal. So, animals as a whole. Um, we did talk about music, and music is can be just listening to music. It can actually change your brain waves as to if you wanted something calm or if you want to get motivated, depending on what music you choose for the day. Um, we have a group, David Fisher Upper Hudson Heroes, that kayak. So we de-stress through kayaking. That's reverse of PTSD if you look at that. So we go out and we don't have to go like so fast. We're on the little of a calm lake, just paddling out with nature. And in my case, I have photography. So they're always after me, come on, let's go, take your pictures later, that kind of thing. So even during the COVID, I've learned when I first retired, I said, I'm never going to do another push up again. And I'm done with this exercise nonsense. What I started to do was I couldn't get to the gym and I couldn't get to the saunas. I started walking, and I have a lot of medical issues, like my knees hurt, for instance. I feel so good. I'm mad if I don't get to walk and do my 10K a day. I get mad. Like it's part of my routine. You want me to do, I have a set time. So I exercises as much as you can. It can be chair yoga, stretches. It can be, a lot of us have physical limitations. Just do what you can. Um, Essential oils. I'm recently reconnecting with that. We learned basic stuff in massage school, but um, there's edibles. You can cook with them. You can, of course, topical, but they all have different things that help if you want to go to sleep or if you want to need energy to get motivated, that kind of thing. There's different kinds of massages. You can do shiatsu, is an old Japanese and it deals with meridians. If you were to chop us down into 12 lines in our bodies, we have these different points, and what it is you stretch them. You move the flow. It's called chi. You move your energy through your body. And I personally think it's so interesting to look at these different modalities, and because I know these different points, pressure points on my body, when I'm doing that, and they say, okay, we're going to do Tai Chi today, or we're going to do Qigong today. Well, I know when my arm goes out like that I'm really stretching that meridian. They can call it anything they want, but I understand what they're doing. Um, so there's all kinds of different cranial sacral massage, and what that is manipulating the spinal fluid. We have a vacuum so there's spinal fluids in our brain and that goes out down our tailbone. And it's a vacuum that regulates our whole body system, our nervous system. And so by holding onto the head and holding onto the sacrum, your tailbone,
Mm-hmm.
that you can manipulate that. And I personally work with a couple of boys with autism, and their mom really appreciates the benefit of it. That's my primary folks that I work on, because all my physical ailments, massage can be taxing.
Right.
So I've learned my limits on it. I still want to, stay with that. Let me think of other kinds of massages that are. Oh, myofascial. So we are full of fascia. It's like a web, right? And all of our muscles are connected. And so a simple arm pull, like a gentle stretching of your arm, if you have a headache or something, it's instant relief. So I do all kinds of stuff. So the biggest guided meditation. I've actually created. I take a lot of photos, or I do art, and so I've actually done slideshows with music behind it. So it's literally, I've created my own guided meditation.
I
Usually
love
about three
meditation.
minutes.
That's my thing.
So yeah, yeah, it's tricky. It's really hard to get rid of everything. To completely your blank slate. In my case, I'm going constantly. My head is going constantly. So the chakras. That's another thing where we have 7 chakras, and so if you're uh, to get your chakras balanced, there's actually a certain way of doing it. It's gentle touch, but to be in tune with them. For instance, I just said I've got too much going on in my head. That means that something else is missing. Am I not grounded? Is my root chakra imbalanced? It all comes together. The mind, body, and spirit all come together. So important.
Beautiful. I agree. I mean, these are the things that help me a lot. I'm studying right now to be a Zen master, and so that
Nice.
requires discipline and meditation. And so,
Yes.
but it's amazing. And for years, I would tell you I could not quiet my mind down
Mhm,
until I
mhm.
learned that you don't necessarily have to, but what you do learn is to let the thoughts come and flow through, so you sort of see them pass by like clouds. And that's where the practice comes in, because it's a practice. And with anything, you start and then you sort of get there, but it really helps me. And that's why I love to talk to people about the different things that they do that has been helping them on their journey of healing,
Mhm.
because we need to help each other and support each other and let each other know what's out there, and that try different things that might actually help you. That, someone else might do this. I also enjoy walking, but I have a friend who likes to run. I have another friend who likes to do like classes, like workout classes, another one
Mhm.
who does
Mhm.
spinning for their exercise. And then I have friends who write,
Mhm.
as well. I have another friend who does meditative dance. And I
Mhm.
know that you have an organization, which is the other thing that I mentioned earlier. There are two things that I love,
Mhm.
that I wanted to talk about with you and that I like to promote on this show.
Mhm.
One of them being alternative therapies, and the other being not for profit organizations that help veterans. And in
Yep.
a way, you fused those two things with
Yes.
Art for Vets. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit before we wrap it up.
Okay. The actual formal name is Support Our Troops slash Arts for Vets, and we are a committee with the American Legion. There's a logo post at in Albany, New York, and I think this is phenomenal in that so many of our members are women. So that means that there's a lot of women in that particular American Legion. You don't see that very often. And
Right.
we're really trying to emphasize that. So that's one of the requirements. You have to be a member, and they just recently you only have to do 1 day of active duty, federal active duty, in order to be a member of the American Legion. Now they used to put us in the auxiliary.
Hmm.
Well, anyway, so we're a committee within that. So that's our, so they're a non-profit, of course, and very supportive. And so how it all got started was I was telling you about these different programs, the writing and art and music
Hmm.
that was at the VA. In January 2016, they took it all away from us. They said, unless you're actually inpatient, we no longer can support these services. You have to, and then they just, so many people, a lot of things happened. Some people just became recluses. Like some people got mad and they tried to contact their senators and uh, write letters to the director, things like that. Well, I got mad. I took three of the people, well, anybody who wanted to come. We all sat down. We developed a plan like, we've got to do this. We can do this. So, three of us sitting around having coffee, we created Arts for Vets. Then I said, well, if we're really going to do this, we really need a non-profit. We can't just say, okay, Penny's created this thing. So, so we found an organization to support us. So we have an umbrella for it, and we do all kinds of stuff. I think I sent you the link that showed the booklet that's interactive.
Yes.
And that's really shows a lot. I want to give credit to all the other non-profits that support veterans, and we kind of piggyback on them.
Hmm.
Like we're going to Virginia's classes. You know, a lot of us are from Arts for Vets. But the kayaking is a different organization. The horses. We actually have music therapists come to our organization. We've done 3 6-week programs where we produced a talent show. We have art shows. So we do a lot. In fact, one of the things I'm now doing, I haven't quite finished it yet, is there's an organization called Warrior Writers, and I've taken all the classes. I just have to they have to watch me facilitate, and then I'll be one of their facilitators. And so what that means is I can run a Warrior Writers workshop within my group, or we can have other veterans join us. So that there's a special format and things that we would follow, but what that means is I don't have to hire a writing facilitator. We not only me, there's a couple other people in the class, and we're going to get other people to. Um, in the military, it'd be called train the trainer, so that we can teach each other our skills that are in this group. So
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And actually, I love that you mentioned equine therapy earlier too, because I know that Virginia, who runs the
Yes.
Barbra Giordano Foundation, does equine therapy, and I love to support that organization. They're one of two that I work really closely with. The other one, um, my regular listeners will remember, is Passageways, and they are working on getting another house in Kansas for women. So I'm going to be as
Oh,
involved
good.
with that as I can be, because when I was there in January, I discovered that there was no shelter, no anything for women veterans.
Uh, uh,
So, yeah, so that needs to change. I'm excited for them to get going with that. And of course, Virginia's organization, which I
mhm,
donate time to, do classes and share my knowledge that I've learned from Brian Rose and the London Real Academy,
mhm,
where I coach like a lot of CEOs and high level people to create either broadcasts or build digital businesses. So I love to share that knowledge with female veterans and through organizations like that. And
mhm.
I also love myself organizations that do things with the arts. So like
Yes.
writing and music and everything that you're doing is just such an amazing thing, an amazing gift. And coincidentally, for a lot of years when I lived in Chicago, I belonged to the American Legion. And I don't think there
Huh?
was more than two of us women. And certainly at the time, they were like just a lot of male energy. And certainly I was quite young at that time. I think I was in my 30s,
Mhm.
and one of very few women. So, and they always thought that my husband was the veteran. So,
Yep.
yeah, so I would like to take a moment to encourage more women to join the American Legion, actually.
Absolutely.
I loved that organization. In fact, you made me think of it that I should go and sign up here in my new location. So,
Excellent.
yeah, what a wonderful thing you're doing and helping so many people and women and veterans. And what an incredible story you've had. So, I
Thank
just
you.
have one more question for you. I
Mhm.
promise I'll let you go. What advice do you have for our veteran sisters who have come behind you to thrive in life?
I think, let me see, to find the resources that you need to go out and ask, I guess. There's information. I don't know why it's so hard to get the information. It's like pulling teeth. But find somebody, network. Um, just start with one person, and then know your benefits. Know you're entitled. Be educated in that regard. So when somebody tells you something, they're just saying something, then you can come back with the correct answer. And I'm sorry, you don't know what you're talking about. Please go to this website or something like that. And there's so many benefits available, just being from the VA alone, and then any of these other non-profits that I would be careful with non-profits too. Not all are equal. you know who's really supporting, and by you'll learn that by talking to other veterans, especially women talking to other women veterans, so that you know that they're the good ones to, Virginia's, or because people just, they just start organizations to make themselves look good,
Hmm.
and there's folks that don't have our best interests at heart also. So beware, right?
Hmm.
you know You still got people who have your back. Nothing's changed. And you don't have to flounder out there alone. Don't be alone.
Oh, I love that.
Support system.
That's right. That peer support, there is nothing like it. People who get you, people who understand the camaraderie that we
Yep.
experience when we're in the military and just understand the lingo and the energy. It's
Yep.
just nothing like it. So, what amazing advice. Thank you for it. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
you
your
so much.
time.
Oh, no, this was fun. I've been really excited for this interview. I enjoyed it very much. I want to thank you for your time and being so candid and open and sharing so much of your story today and for being inspiring. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And with that, I am going to wrap it up. I want to say to everyone listening, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. It has been incredible up to this point, and there's so much more work that we're doing here at the Female Veterans Podcast. As you know, I have a new video series coming up on the Veterans Channel. You'll be able to find it at theveteranschannel.com. You can also listen to my podcast there. And we're going to keep going and putting our stories out there and letting the world know that we're here, that we are the veteran, right? I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.